What up, YouTube? This is another weekly video on me going over the stuff that I resonated with throughout the week. Just realized that the camera quality, the way that the lighting hits is horrible. I'll maybe fix that at some point or maybe not. But regardless, I want to go through the stuff that most again resonated with me throughout the week. So this is like quotes, snippets, ideas, visuals that catch my attention and I want to save for later. And these um pieces of content might come from me scrolling Instagram or X or a screenshot from a like podcast at a particular timestamp. It could be from wherever really. And so I kind of collect all these cards, I guess is a way to call them, but they could be anything. And then weekly, I go ahead and just kind of categorize them and see what are the main topics or the main ideas that I've been drawn to in the past few days for me to then just kind of dump this long form um, stream of consciousness and kind of me going over and adding a bit more context into all of these. And so I've gone ahead and categorized these um, things or cards into three main buckets. One being visuals, self explanatory. Two is this idea of structure and substance that I'll probably go over in depth and in detail because I think this is the main idea that I've been grappling with or that has kind of consumed my intellect lately. And then these are just kind of miscellaneous. I feel that this week it has a lot of stuff, so I probably won't go into much depth into many of these except for kind of structure and substance. Oh, cool. I didn't even know that I had this. And so structure and substance is the idea that is most relevant to me. But first, let's start with visuals. Let's start with this bug that I think is just beautiful. It caught my attention, and I think that as I was thinking, as I captured this, what I was thinking is like, wow, nature has a way to like express colors and forms and patterns just beautifully. Like how this pattern's different from like this pattern's different from like the legs. I don't know. It's pretty clear the beautifulness expressed here. I also like this visual. The internet swallows itself. Oh, I won't add anything to that. I really like this idea of like it's hard to reconcile these two things, not wanting to be put in a box, but also wanting to belong, and resonated with that. Really like this kind of this is probably not real, but this idea of like a typewriter or what a modern typewriter would look like seems cool. I actually didn't read this article, but the headline struck me, which is like the epidemic of constant communication. I do agree and do believe that we are over connected these days, and there have to be like boundaries on how people or the expectations people have on receiving responses back from people right now. I think the expectation culturally and societally is within the day, but that's very, very new. And I think detrimental um, to everybody really if that's the expectation, because that doesn't allow time for um, like inner connection. You're constantly stimulated from the outside because you expect for you to be constantly available. Uh, this one was the more romantic side. I hope one day my Wikipedia page links to yours. Found it cool. A computer can never be horny or sad. Therefore, the computer must never make an artistic decision. And then lastly, this quadrant of like consuming alone is probably bad, like scrolling on bed, scrolling IG Reels or TikTok is horrible. Everybody knows that feeling. Consuming together, going to a movie or like going for coffee or going for dinner, you're consuming stuff, but it's still fun because it's on together. And then the other axis is creation or creating. Creating alone is good, but then creating together is where I guess this person says where meaning is found. So I think there's some truth to that. Anywho, kind of the visual section. The main idea that I want to cover is this of structure and substance, and it really started one day or one night. It might have been like 1 a.m. This is a screenshot from my Apple Notes, and I put yin yang, and then I started noting these basically um, dualisms that exists in many aspects. I know that says nothing. Quantity and quality, volume and efficiency, absolutes and percentages, the liquid and the container, substance and structure, input and optimization. They're like two sides of the same coin or different sides to the same thing. And I'll just um I'll just more so read this, but this is kind of the main idea that I have been fascinated with. And this has this idea or this story or parable, I guess, is this idea of like quantity and quality and the trade-off, the inherent trade-off that one thinks that there's a trade-off between these two things, but sometimes you need a lot of quantity to find quality. I'll before I read that, I'll be like clear as to like how it's resonating to me right now. So, um, I have an app. I created an app, and an app is for an app to be useful in the world or to many people, it needs two things. It needs the container, meaning the app, the fact that it works, that there's buttons that you can click, and the actions that the user expects to perform happen accordingly. So, like the structure of things, but then the liquid in this case is kind of the usage. You ideally, as an app owner or creator, you want a lot of people using your thing, not just like a handful. So you need a lot of liquid that goes into this container that you've created, which is your app. So, or in other words, if you're like in a typical like business context, the liquid is the growth and the container is the retention or the acquisition of users and the retention of users. So you want a lot of people coming in into your thing, and the efficiency is like how much can you keep that volume contained within that thing. So like how much attention and eyeballs can you draw to your thing, and then how much of that attention is then converted into like using your thing. So a lot of quantity, a lot of eyeballs drawn over to the quality of your product. A lot of liquid being poured into the container. A lot of input into your funnel and then the optimization of that funnel. Or in short, I think this is kind of the more general way to put it. You need the substance of the thing and then like the structure in which that thing is contained in. So for example, right now, and this applies to like every creation or everything I think, for sure to anything that is created. So for example, this video right now, the substance is the thing that I am saying, like what I'm trying to communicate, and then the structure is like how it is contained. It's contained in a 20-minute YouTube video, or the substance could be paint and the structure could be a 20 by 20 canvas that then creates the painting. Same thing for music. The substance is like the raw feeling and lyrics and like drums and vocals of the thing, and then the structure is like how it's packaged in a 3-minute audio file that's distributed through Spotify. I And so like there's always like these two things that are interconnected because you can't have, I guess you could have an app with no usage, but then it's really not an app. You actually need both things to exist, for the thing that's being created to be kind of valuable. And and so that's kind of the main idea that I've been thinking about lately. And so, for example, I have these inherent tendencies to focus way more on like, and this is like left, well, I don't know if it's left brain and right brain. Actually, it's like that back, but like I have way more of a knack or of an instinct to focus on like the container, like a lot of time being spent on like the code and how things look and if things work and like if they're efficient and done in the best way possible, the quality of things like structure. I guess I think a lot of in those ways. But then, for example, a growth marketer or a marketing native person thinks way more in like, what's the hook for this video, how many people are engaging with this video, like a lot of like volume type stuff, um that they focus more on. It's like building and then selling. It's the two sides of the same thing, which is like a company, for example. You need both. So I'm way more focused on this right hand side and the structure of things. So I'm like trying to see how to get more into this left side of things. Like how do I talk more to users, bring more users into an app that already has structure and works. Like how do I showcase it to more and more people? And I found this parable where it's an interesting experiment where a ceramics teacher divided his class into two groups. Um, on the left side of the studio, these students would be graded solely on the quality of the work that they produced, and all those on the right on quality. So half of the class of the ceramics class would be focused on quality, the other half on quantity. His procedure was simple. On the final day of the class, he would bring in a scale and weigh the work of the quantity group. 50 pounds of pot rated an A, 40 pounds a B, and so on. So like people being graded on quantity, just mattered was like how much raw input were you producing, and it was like weighed. So if a student just produced a lot of stuff or a lot of pottery, so 50 pounds, that would be graded an A. Whereas the quality half, they would be graded on like the perfect pot. They only needed to produce only one pot, and it would have to be perfect to get an A. So the gradings structures would be different depending on which half that you were on. And kind of this is the insight. When the grading time came, a curious fact emerged, which is that the works of highest quality were all produced by the group being graded for quantity. It seems that while the quantity group was busily churning out piles of work and learning from their mistakes, the quality group had sat theorizing about perfection, and in the end had little more to show for their efforts than grandiose theories and a pile of dead clay. Meaning the people that produced more and more clay ended up producing even the best work just through sheer volume than those tasked to produce the perfect one. So you can see like the how you would think that quality and quantity are inherently like traded off, when in reality you can see how quality emerges out of just like a lot of raw input. Um, it's the few who matter. So say like you're meeting a bunch of people, it's like only a few that you'll really resonate with, but to find that few you generally have to reach a lot of people. Um so again, this is all for me to get like inspired on, like it doesn't matter if I just produce like raw amount, like a bunch of like videos out into the world that just like describe what block does. um because I only care about like total amount of views and engagement. because even if like 0.1% of those views actually turn into users, 0.1% of a billion is still like a bunch. So like the raw top of the funnel number is the one that really matters. And even if the percentage conversion from like top of the funnel, which is the view, to the bottom of the funnel, which is an engaged user, if that ratio is really low, like 0.1%, if it's 0.1% out of a billion, it's still like a very large number. Advice from chat for me, like measure mass before efficiency. And this is, I won't get it if I won't get into this particular card, but if you're interested in a cool story, just Google Utopia as a particular restaurant in Brooklyn, where this restaurant in Brooklyn only really cared about the substance, so like the quality of the food that they delivered, and the structure, which is like the lighting of the restaurant or the entrance of the restaurant or the table that the restaurant like seated its guests, like wasn't really fancy, but the substance really mattered. And so this is like a story of like a couple restaurant guests saying like we were completely like dumbfounded by like how raw this restaurant looked, and really um did not trust the quality, but when the food came, the substance, they really liked it. So again, another example of like how the substance might be really the thing that matters, and the structure, or like the design and how of the quality, the perfectionism might not matter that much if the thing that you're providing is really valuable. But then again, I guess this card points to it that there's you can't produce a baby in 1 month by getting 9 women pregnant, which is to say, like, sometimes volume, getting 9 women pregnant isn't necessarily the answer, because you can't produce a baby in 1 month. Some things just take time, right? Compounding, craftsmanship, and good judgment. So it's always a balance between these two things. And but I guess for me right now, in my particular context and situation, it's kind of way more like quantity and volume, and like getting way more liquid into the container that is my app. But anywho, you could apply it to whatever your current situation is, and maybe draw parallels. Main idea, structure, and substance. We saw some cool visuals, and then just miscellaneous ideas. To be honest, I don't even know. These are all over. Um, let's go for this one. When creation becomes infinite, selection becomes the art. I think that's really true. I think that's where like good judgment and taste comes in, like you being able to filter what you deem as good, um, is where the value is shifting to. You attract what you think you deserve, and you repel what you think you do not deserve. Also pretty true. Um, the body carries what the mind refuses to hold. Also very true. And I haven't read this book, but the body keeps the score probably talks about this. I'm also very interested in world building and like that entire concept. Alex Danko, world building. If anybody's interested in that, this is a pretty solid article about what world building is. But this other person, Kenning, says that world building is a process and practice of individuation, self discovery, and self expression. Here's the difference between awareness, attention, and insight. Awareness is a dark room full of objects. Attention is a flashlight that you shine on one of those objects in the room, and the intention is your decision to shine that flashlight on one of those objects. I guess I'd been thinking a lot about like what's the difference between, or I actually had been thinking about like intention, what really is it? And I think this is a solid example. Um, being resonant greater than being relevant. I don't know what to think about that one, but resonated with me and I captured it. Things that are most fulfilling are hard to start and easy to quit. Cheap dopamine. Sorry, things that are and then things that are least fulfilling are easy to start, hard to quit. Cheap dopamine here, and then hard to start, easy to quit, like going to the gym. So like cheap dopamine versus like eating good and going to the gym probably fits in this card. I guess it was a good way to frame this. And then I guess a couple or three other things. This is somebody, Sithara, saying that at this precise moment, I'm cheating on three separate friend groups who each believe that I will be joining their hypothetical countryside communes. After a slew of years defined by tech fatigue, it's not too strange that so many of my friends have independently reached the conclusion that they need to return to the soil. What's most curious about this is that every industrial revolution has produced some sort of romantic backlash where people run away from tech and towards the human, the medieval, the handmade, the sublime. And I think that's just like a general cultural undercurrent that is true today. Like a lot of people are feeling that like more analog. Um, maybe like going to the countryside is a bit more extreme, but I could probably see that lifestyle trending upwards. Um, I also really like this one that mysticism is a decentralization model, meaning everybody has access to the mystic, to mystic experiences. Like it's not gated by any means or by anyone. Anybody can access gatekeeping, yeah. And there's nobody direct an organized system directing information or gatekeeping. Um, like everybody has access to the divine is really what these series of cards are pointing to. You can pause and read if you want. I won't go over this, but that's the main idea from here. And then lastly, I read this book years ago. I don't know how this I collected this card, but so many people walk around with a meaningless life. They seem half asleep, even when they're busy doing things they think are important. This is because you're chasing the wrong things. Devote yourself to loving others, devote yourself to community around you, devote yourself to creating something that gives you purpose and meaning. It's a good way to end this. Peace out.